Welcome to the Gabrielle Laura Show podcast. This podcast is a safe space for new and aspiring service-based entrepreneurs. Gabrielle is a niche coach, and her unscripted podcast walks you through the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how to navigate the in-between. You can expect a mix of business strategies and personal development tips to help you get to the next level with a little bit of spirituality sprinkled in as well. Get cozy and please stay a while. You are more than welcome here. Hello, Ciara. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Guys, this is our first video recording of the Gabrielle Laura Show, which I'm so excited for. You guys asked to be able to watch this on YouTube as well, and Ciara was nice enough to be happy to be my first guinea pig with this. So we are recording this, and if you're listening to the audio version on Apple or Spotify or whatever, I will put a link to the YouTube in case you wanted to watch us as well. Ciara, hello. I can't wait for this.
I know, me too.
It's going to be so exciting. So today, guys, we're going to be talking all things messaging. Ciara is a messaging expert, and one of the biggest questions that my community has had lately has been around messaging. Like, how do I convert a lurker in my community into a paid client? And your messaging is huge for that. So I invited Ciara on to talk all things messaging with you guys to really help you solidify that sales copy and get these people converted so that you can make a big impact. So before we dive into all that fun stuff, Ciara, share your story with us. Like, this is one of my favorite questions. Where did you start? How did you get here? Like, what is your background?
Yes, well, like I said, so happy to be here and chat all things messaging because it's my jam and what I love talking about. How I got here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ciara Gigleux and I'm the owner of the Copy Atelier. I'm messaging, copywriting, marketing expert and specialist, and at the agency we help female entrepreneurs build $1 million brands through elevating their messaging, refining their copy, and strategizing their marketing. With the agency, we're actually coming up to, and I think by the time this comes out, we'll have passed like the 1-year birthday of the agency. So that's quite exciting. So I launched the agency last year, December 2020, but I had been working as like a freelance solopreneur copywriter since January 2019, and even slightly before that in late 2018 when I left my job. So my road to get where I am now in terms of marketing and things like that was a little bit different. My background is in academia. I was an archaeologist, so nothing to do with this or what I do now. But you know, like there's always these little things. Like I did my PhD, and like a lot of the things that when you're doing your PhD prepares you for, number one, owning your own business because you have to be in charge of your own stuff. But number two, you know, with academia and you're writing papers, you're presenting at conferences, you're trying to get people to pay attention to your research and actually buy into it. So, you know, similarities between that and marketing. And then I also started volunteering on the local committee of Cancer Research UK, where I was from. And I joined that, stayed there for about 2 years, and was like the vice chairwoman randomly. Like I didn't intend to randomly become the vice chairwoman of it. But when I was there, I did a lot of marketing because I was like the youngest person on the committee by about 3 decades. So of course, I kind of took on digital marketing because it was like, oh, you can do that because you're young. So it was quite good actually, because I was able to sort of bridge the gap between what I was doing with my PhD and like all those kind of transferable skills, and then with marketing. And I started to realize that, I really like this, like building awareness of things, trying to get people to come to things. And it ended up, I just was working as an academic editor, enjoying the work, but very quickly, very similar to you, realized, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life and work for someone else. And so I decided I wanted to have my own business, and I was interested in the idea of marketing, and I just thought it would be really fun. Like I was kind of over the dry academia kind of a bit. I've got a very split personality in that I'm really analytical and kind of like academic, but then I also am very creative and want to get to lean into that a lot. And then in academia, often like you don't. So I wanted to be able to do something that would allow me to just be a bit more creative. And I find that marketing, and especially marketing for brands and companies and those kinds of things, is that there's almost no limits on how creative you can be, and the fun that you can have with it, while also, you know, being effective and things like that. So that's kind of like a roundabout way of how I got to where I am now. Started out as a copywriter, really leaned into and specialized in conversion copywriting, which is the type of copywriting that I do. And then from there, kind of grew that into being more focused overall on your messaging, because that's the heart of your copy, and of your marketing strategy, because that's kind of like what you do with your copy and where you put it. So those three things have become my signature trio, and I really enjoy it.
I love that. Oh my, well, your story is so cool. And
Like,
this exactly. And I just want to highlight to everyone, like, that's the power of pivoting. I feel like younger people give themselves such a hard time, and I definitely did this too, where we're like, we have to have it all figured out right out of college, right? Like our first job, that's our forever job. We figure out our passion, life is good. And your story just goes to show that, like, it's okay to bounce around. It's okay. Like you really
totally
bounced around, and like that is so beautiful. And I love where you ended up, and I can't wait to dive into that. So you mentioned your signature trio. So can you just lay out those three things in your signature trio again?
Yes. So it's messaging, copy, and marketing. And really, it's all about elevating your messaging.
Yeah.
So getting it up to the level it needs to be, refining your copy, and strategizing out your marketing.
I love that.
That's what we do with and for our clients at the Copy Atelier.
I love that framework. I feel it's so impactful, and it's so incredibly important. And today, guys, we're just diving deep into that messaging piece. So let's just go on into it. Like, what advice do you give new entrepreneurs in this space in regards to their messaging if they can't afford a copywriter? What are a couple pieces that you find that newer people really miss in their copy where they're not converting people, right? Like, what is that missing link?
I would say, and this is why like I thought it's such a great thing to speak about, because the two things, like finding your niche and really figuring out what it is you want to be doing with your business, and messaging, go hand in hand. Because what a lot of people don't realize about their messaging, and I'm forever trying to make people aware of this, is that your messaging really is the foundation of your brand, right? Your brand and how you want people to feel and what people think about you and all those kinds of things. It really comes down to your messaging, because that's how you get those things across, right? You know, visual stuff is great and is very necessary as well. But realistically, like without the core messaging, you don't have a brand. And so I would say actually that's the most important part to be focusing on. And so in terms of what is missing, if someone is having a sort of like conversion gap where, for example, they might be bringing in traffic, but no one's ever buying. And so there's a sort of gap between, like, they've got everything they need, but there's just something not happening. There's no conversions actually happening. Or whether people who are brand new are finding it hard to actually generate that traffic and that sort of like momentum. Very often it's going to come down to your brand identity and like that core brand messaging regarding you as an individual, right? And as whether it's you know, a sort of personal brand, or whether it's an agency or something like that, if you're not able to make it clear to people why you're different, like your USP, why they should work with you, what you stand for, what you're all about, what your mission is, all those kinds of like core brand messaging aspects, there isn't really going to be anything there for people to connect with. And that's a massive thing, because, you know, the online business world is very saturated. And there's other people who do a similar thing to what you do, right? There's all niches, they've got lots and lots of different people in it. So your biggest differentiator is you. So you need to be able to like make that clear in your messaging. So I often say that that's one of the biggest things.
That is huge. And I like, so recently, guys, I did an interview on Ciara's podcast, and I think it really just kind of like smacked us both where we're like, wow, this is just goes so hand in hand because
Mm.
that's it. It's like owning who you are. And I preach to people like owning your story, and your niche comes from that. And Ciara preaches like your messaging. Like that is
Yeah.
it's infusing your personality, your morals, your ethics, your story, right? Like who you are. That's what's going to get people to convert. Because so often we're like looking for the next best strategy, right? We're trying to find all the buzzwords to use or the best headlines, and like maybe sometimes that is the problem, but other times I find that it's really just people running away from themselves and like what
Yeah.
they bring to the party. That's what people are here for. They work for you, for your mission and your morals and like what you can deliver to them. And I love how you really hone on in that individuality aspect, because I do find
Mm-hmm.
that people have a really hard time finding their voice in this space. Like, let's talk about that. Do you have any suggestions for people who are really struggling to just own their voice, right? Like, really infuse their personality into their messaging?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes down to two things, because when people talk about voice and thinking about like voice and tone, and they're thinking about the actual language, the words that they're using, and yes, that's really important because you're kind of trying to think about in general what feelings, what emotions, what kind of vibe essentially do you want your brand and everything about you to evoke. And like, how do you want people to feel when they encounter your brand, right? So you'll have like good examples of brands that will use quite like their voice and tone will be quite low, casual and informal and friendly and kind of cool. And then you'll have other ones that's a bit more refined. Or you think of luxury brands, they tend to be much more sort of proper, for lack of a better word, and like refined and kind of more formal. That's one aspect of it, very important. And I would say that comes down to thinking about, like I said, how you want your brand to be, and you yourself to be, in like how perceived, right? How you want people to feel when they encounter it. It also comes down to things like with your overall brand identity, thinking about, like, for example, your brand archetype. So that's that just sort of that personality characteristics of your brand. If your brand was a person, like this is the kind of person it would be. That's something that I always encourage people to think about as well. But I would also say, and so that's kind of often, especially with a personal brand, like that's going to be reflective of your personality. And it always, it always should be, just because I also think that if you're creating something that's very, very connected to yourself, so like a personal brand, it if there's no point trying to make it something that you're not. So like, for example, if you're trying to be like really, really, really hip and cool, when in real life you don't speak like that, you maybe aren't, like, I'm not saying that you're not hip and cool, but like, do you see what I mean? I always think that there sometimes people, that's where they can go wrong with the voice and tone aspect and the personality of their brand as a whole, is that they try to create something that is vastly different to who they are as a person. And at the end of the day, if it's a personal brand, and especially even at the beginning, it's you creating it, you're going to be the one who's doing most of this work. It's going to be very hard to keep it up in terms of churning out content that doesn't sound like you. Like, um, something that people find that really, really hard. And the only reason that, for example, within the agency, we're able to write copy for different clients and create content that's completely different brand personalities and voices is because I have training in how to do that, right? Like, I'm used to doing that. That's my area of expertise. But so that's one thing I would say. And then the other thing I would say is that you also want to be thinking about, in terms of like the voice and the tone, and like you say, not kind of really making people connect with you within that messaging, with you as a brand and everything like that. It's also where you want to be thinking about some of these other core aspects of your messaging and your brand identity, like, for example, your values, and even like your mission, and what is it that you stand for, because again, they're the kinds of things that people are going to connect with, in the same way with your voice and your tone, and it's like, oh yeah, this is cool, this is, I relate to, resonate with this brand. But also, what about what else they're saying, and the values and things like that too.
I love that. And like there's just a huge theme of like stepping in to you and not looking elsewhere. Like I see so often like people changing their messaging at the snap of a finger because they saw somebody
Mm,
post this and it sounded cool. And so now they're trying to sound like that. But to your point, like in actuality, that's not really how they speak. And
yeah,
I find that like just in the entrepreneurial space, like I say all the time, it's one of, definitely not the biggest, but one of the biggest personal development journeys you'll go on with yourself. And it's
yeah,
really stepping into like what you bring to the table. And if there are wounds that need to be healed, like you're going to have no choice but to heal them, to really own that, to own how you speak and correlate that into your messaging, right? So that you're perceived
yeah.
as you are, right? For you to show up
Hmm.
on video, for you to show up through your content, for you to show up through your programs. Like there's so much of that. And I didn't expect to really like, which is kind of funny. Like before I was sitting down for this conversation, like I didn't expect it to kind of be that theme, but it is so interesting how that all plays such a role in your marketing and overall in the success of your business.
Totally. And that's the thing. Like, I would say 2 points. Number one, thinking about that personal development journey and all these kinds of things, you have to feel confident in yourself and in what it is that you're saying in order to be able to stand up and say it, right? Exactly. Because what I often see with people, and this often is a problem, and like one of the biggest problems is that it's not that they don't have things to say to people, right? It's not that there aren't actual, real, tangible reasons for why their business is different, why they're better, why their method or this or that or whatever. And it's not that they don't have things that differentiate themselves. A lot of the time I talk about things like thought leadership and like becoming a thought leader in your industry. That requires you to stand out from the crowd. It requires you to really almost like, well, disrupt the industry that you're in, and really just sort of stand and fly your flag for what it is that you believe in, even if, and especially if, it goes against the status quo of your industry, right? Like I really sort of advocate for that kind of thing. But you need to be able to be confident enough to actually stand up and do that, because often you'll have people who in private, they believe in this, they think this, I think this is ridiculous, but they never say it. And if they say it, they would realize that that's actually the secret sauce. Like that is the thing that is going to cut through the noise. And so there has to be that confidence there and that kind of realization as well sometimes that you just got to just do it, like leap in, like, go into it and do it. The second point I would say, similar to when we were chatting on my podcast, when we were talking about, making sure your business is in alignment with you, I believe it to be very, very similar with your messaging and your marketing as a whole as well, because like you say, it's very easy to see somebody doing something and to think immediately, well, I've got to add that in to like my marketing strategy or what I'm saying or how I'm saying or how I'm showing up. And really the best thing that I've learned from personal experience as well is you have to realize what feels right for you and ignore the fact that someone else is doing that great. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that, well, not don't realize, but they forget, is that you can't actually see the results of what somebody else is doing. So you see them doing something and think, oh, I got to do that because they're doing that. Why? That might not be working for them. Like their behind the scenes results might not actually be great. And you're going to stop doing something and do something else, even though you have no idea if it's actually working for you. So definitely, like, there has to be that alignment. And I'm quite big into that in general. Like you say, it's personal development. It's like the whole of your business, right? And I think one of the biggest things you have to get on board with when you're starting your business, and it is a journey, like it takes a while to get there, is to realize that you have to, everything that you're doing in your business has to be in alignment with you. Everything. The clients that you work with, how you work with clients, what it is you say to people, where you say it, and how much content you post, whatever it is, it has to sit right with you. Otherwise, it's useless. And so I've really leaned into that. And especially this year, I've really leaned into that whole kind of thing. I'm very interested into like human design and kind of like really thinking about like, I'm a generator, And so everything's very much like, trust your gut. And if it's not a hell yes, it needs to become a no. And I like that has helped me so much this year, from little things to do with, should I do this? Like, do I actually want to do this? To bigger things of like, do I want to run this offer again? Do I want to create this thing? Do I want to do this? Whatever. So that was a huge answer, but exactly, there's just so many parts to it, but it's all together.
It's huge because it all goes into play. And especially how you said, like, it's not just alignment in the beginning of your business. It's when you're a seasoned entrepreneur as well. Like, and I love how you said, like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Like, and I say that all the time. Like, you have to genuinely feel, like you said, whether it is an offer, somebody that you work with, somebody that you collaborate with. If it is not a hell yes, it is a hell no. Maybe it was a hell yes yesterday, and maybe today it's a no. And like, that's okay. Own that and like allow yourself to really be guided in that, like whether it's through your intuition or however you want to swing it. Like for you, it seems like through your intuition. Me, it's certainly, I always lean on my intuition in my business. And I just love how you hit on that, because it really truly hit the nail on the head. And something else that I wrote down here as you were talking too, it was more towards your first point. It's like, it's going left when everyone else goes right. And it's,
yeah, I always say it's zigging when everyone else is zagging. Like
it's allowing yourself to do that. And so the word that popped into or the phrase that popped into my brain as I was thinking that is polarizing content and polarizing messaging. Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about that. People get really freaked out by it, but what are your thoughts? First of all, how would you define polarizing content for anyone who's listening who may not know? And what are your thoughts around it?
Well, polarizing content is really content, or polarizing messaging is messaging that kind of gets people talking in a way, right? It's messaging, or it's standing up for something, or standing for something that's actually going against what everyone else is saying, right? So it's really having an opinion. It's like opinionated messaging, I guess, right? It's really sort of being like, this is my opinion, even if other people don't agree with it. And how I feel about it is I love it, because it's exactly what you need to be putting out there in order to be standing out, like you say, in order to be cutting through the noise, and really to be positioning yourself as a thought leader in your industry. I did a podcast episode on it a while ago. I mean, it could have even been last year by now, the benefits of being polarizing. Like that's how much I love it. Like it's really a core piece. And for me, when it comes to polarizing messaging, it's really about thinking about these things that I call like the hills that you're willing to die on, and figuring out what those are. And so really the hills that you're willing to die on are just like the things that you believe in, specifically about your industry, like specifically about what it is that you do, why you do it, why you think this, doing it this way makes more sense, or is better, or is more effective, or is whatever, than doing it this way. And it's really getting kind of clear on what those hills are for you. And then weaving them through your messaging and putting them front and center, and it doesn't mean, I think people can get scared of the idea of polarizing messaging, because they think that means you have to be out there kind of like disagreeing with everything that anyone is saying. And that's not what it is, right? You could agree with 95% of what everyone in your industry does, but there just might be something that and it doesn't have to be, I also think people think it has to be like aggressive, and it's like you're going to be like shouting and swearing at people for not agreeing with you. And that's not what it is. It could even be something as simple as, and I would say one of my kind of polarizing messages, like hills that I'm willing to die on, that isn't actually doesn't seem very kind of like scary and kind of offensive to anyone, is that I don't think enough people focus on messaging, right? Like that's one of my things. Like the hill that I'm willing to die on is how important your messaging is to your marketing. And a lot of people within the marketing industry, which of course is huge, but even if you come down into like the copywriting industry, messaging isn't something a lot of people talk about, and it's not something a lot of people focus on, and it isn't something that people think when they're starting their business, for example, I need to think about some of these core aspects of my messaging. No, like instead they think about their logo and their brand colors, and then that's it. Like, so that's a hill that I'm willing to die on, and that's one of my polarizing things. But it's kind of gentle, right? It's not actually that mad. And I would say it could even be something as simple as, if you're, for example, a coach, and say you're a business coach, and say you really don't agree with the fact that everybody always starts off doing X, Y, Z, and you think actually they need to be thinking about ABC first. That's like a hill that you're willing to die on. That's something that you believe in. There's a reason for why you believe in it. You could probably like stand and speak to somebody for an hour about why you believe in it, if not longer. It's something that you like, it kind of, I always think a really good way to figure out and to understand, like, oh, that's actually something that's polarizing, something that should be part of my core messaging, is the things that when you're talking about them to someone, you feel that like fire in you, and it's like that passion, and you're just, it's like you're debating some important subject. It's just like there's this passion there that you can't fake. And I think if you find out that, like, wow, whenever I talk about that, I get really like hyped up and I love it and I feel excited and I could just talk for days, that's something you should be leaning into with your messaging, because clearly it's something important to you, and also that energy is
Right, that the energy is everything, right? And like that just goes to show that like that's you stepping into who you are and your beliefs. Like, and I love how you said too, polarizing messaging, it doesn't have to be like absurd. It does not have to be like you like something people always think, oh, it has to be political or something like that. Not at all.
Yeah, like a conspiracy
Like,
theory.
no, you don't have to say who you're voting for and like your stand, like any, like it's not, does not have to be that at all. Could be if that's what feels good to you and that and whatever, but like it doesn't have to be. Like one of my polarizing things, I like how you shared yours, so I'll share two of mine. One, I will never, ever, ever, ever lead with or probably even mention my finances in my business. A lot of people,
Yeah.
especially business coach, which I am, all the business coaches out there, 9.9 out of 10, they talk about their money that they made in their business. I don't do that because I don't want people to work with me based off the amount of money I make. I want them to work with
Yeah.
me based off of the impact and the transformation I can get them based off the transformation that my other clients get. I will always lead with my other clients and their impact and like, or the transformation that they're seeing. And that bugs the shit out of a lot of people. Like they don't like that. And I'll just, it doesn't feel aligned with me ever. Like it just doesn't. And like that really throws people off. And another one, you probably hear so many people saying, you don't need a niche. You are your niche. Oh my God. And I always say like, that's great, but what part of you do you monetize? And they just, it's like no one really has an answer to it. And like, that's the confusion. And that's the advice that these new entrepreneurs are getting. The reason why I didn't make money for 6 months is that exact reason. Like they don't have a focus. They don't know what they're doing. And so when they hear that from a more seasoned person, they're like, oh, I don't need a niche. And then they have egg on their face a couple months later because they don't have a focus. And like, those are two hills. I love how you said hills you're willing to die on. Those are two I'm willing to die on. And like, it's going against the grain. Like there's a lot of people in my community, right? People I really respect in this space. They always preach you don't need a niche. I go in and preach you do need a niche. And like that's okay. It's okay to have differing opinions and like owning them.
Yeah. Exactly.
People get really stressed by that. So I'm happy that we hit on that because like that I just feel like that is like a big piece of building your community. It's like showcasing your values. It's not so much showcasing, I don't know, I don't feel like it's always just like showcasing like what your business does and stuff. Like yes, you obviously have to really showcase your mission, but you really have to show for like what you stand for in the market and like what it's going to be like working with you. So that kind of leads me to my next question, like transitioning here a little bit over to like somebody's sales page. When it comes to like sales copy, do you have any recommendations for people that they can start implementing ASAP to really help kind of convert any lurkers maybe into paid clients if they're having trouble with conversion?
Yes, huge topic. So I'm going to try to keep it down. But if we're thinking about sales pages, and obviously we're trying to remember that your sales page is going to be the final destination of your funnel, right? It's kind of like you're going to have been working in different places and in different ways and methods to bring people to your sales page, because that's going to be the place where they can make that final conversion to either buy your course or sign up for your membership or apply for your high ticket one-on-one coaching program, whatever it is. So when it comes to thinking about if someone is seeing like a lack of conversions on their from their sales page, so number one recommendation would be make sure you are actually tracking your stats. Like, make sure you're actually having a look at the analytics of things and not just going by, well, no one has bought, so therefore there's an issue. Because actually you're not going to see where there is an issue, because when you're thinking about a funnel, whether you're thinking about it in the linear fashion or linear sense of the word, although I like to think less of funnels being linear and more of like a marketing ecosystem being this kind of like big galaxy of stuff happening, it's important to realize that there's multiple stops on which people can drop off, right? There's multiple areas that people can like flit away and like you lose them. So you need to first of all be tracking things and your stats and your analytics and the activity and things, so that you can understand actually where those drop-offs are occurring or where the conversion is not occurring, because there's multiple conversions before that final conversion. So for example, if you have you're talking about lurkers, right? So, well, where are those lurkers? Because are they lurking on your sales page? And you could look at that from seeing how many people are actually landing on your sales page, how many people are reading your sales pages, like those kinds of analytics. But if you're thinking, well, lurker is more to do with, for example, social media audience, right? People who are looking at your stories and who are commenting on your post or whatever, they're not actually then, you're not seeing that translated into conversions, paid conversions and things like that. That again is going to tell you something different, because if you're having a hard time getting people from, let's say, Instagram to your sales page, that's first of all, you're thinking about the content you're putting out there, which also has to be sales copy, right? Which is also trying to get people to take an action, that which essentially is what conversion copywriting is all about, and sales copy needs to be about. But that'll help you actually figure out, well, where is the focus on? When it comes to your sales page specifically, if you're seeing a lack of conversions, number one, you want to be thinking about the messaging, right? So you're wanting to be thinking about the copy itself. What is it saying to people? Is it actually saying to people what it needs to be saying to them in order to get them to buy? So again, when it comes to conversion copywriting, which is very data driven, it's very research driven, and one of the most important aspects of it is this idea of A/B testing and of tracking your stats and of optimizing things. So you need to be, that's why you need to track your stats, so that you can see, is this heading landing with people? Are people staying on the page and continuing to read down because this heading is doing its job? This main page headline is doing its job of grabbing people's attention and getting them to keep reading. Every single line of copy has the same job, which is to get people to keep reading, right? They have to keep reading past the main page headline and then the next section and then down and then down and then down. So that's number one. Number two, the thing to understand about sales pages is that they're laid out to mimic the buyer's journey and those levels of customer awareness. And the idea is to, with your copy, you need to be creating momentum and pulling people down through the levels of customer awareness along that buyer's journey until they're at the point, I call it the confirmation stage, where they're going to say yes, where they want to buy this thing, work with you, whatever it is. So you also have to be understanding, are you effectively doing that? Are you actually pulling people down through these levels enough? Are you, for example, we always start sales pages off in the problem aware stage. So we're writing copy that's speaking to the problem, that's hitting on their pain points, that's really focused on that. Are you doing that enough? Often, number one thing people aren't doing enough is that they're not speaking to the problem enough in their copy. And I think that's because a lot of people are wary. I've had this comment in the past from people, I don't want it to be too negative. And what you have to realize is that it's not about being negative, it's about human beings, how we make decisions, and conversion copywriting and marketing really plays a lot on like the psychology of decision making and sales and all these kinds of things, right? I find it really interesting. And how we make decisions as human beings is kind of like we're doing whatever we need to do to avoid a risk. And a risk to us, hundreds of thousands of years ago was being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Obviously now it's not really the same, but our brains, their software hasn't been updated. So we still are making decisions with that kind of like lens in front of it. So what that means is that in order to get someone to make a decision, you have to essentially motivate them enough. And what motivates them is the idea that if you don't fix this problem, you're risking something greater. If you don't figure out how to do this thing's going to happen. And it's not about scaremongering either. It's not about creating fake problems. It's just about tapping into knowing what it is that person is currently going through and how they feel about it, and knowing where that person wants to be and how they want to feel, right? And so knowing that, for example, if they are completely disheartened and stressed out and overwhelmed because they don't have, I don't know, a content strategy, let's say, for the next 6 months for their business, right? Let's say there's something to do with that they have no idea what they're doing, and what else is that causing them to feel, and to sort of, how else is that problem manifesting itself in their life? And then you're understanding how they want to feel, right? They want to feel like they are in control and that things are taken care of, and that this, that, and the other thing, whatever it is. So you have to be able to show them in your copy and to hit on those things so that they can start to be like, yeah, this is really bad. I do need to fix this problem. Like, I do need to find some kind of way to figure this issue out and to get over this challenge and to do whatever it is that they need to do. And it leads them down to the place where they know this solution is the thing that they need, this course, this membership, this one-on-one coaching program, whatever it is. So what I would say is that you have to make sure you really are agitating the problem enough. You really are hitting on the pain points. And that comes down to understanding what they are in the first place. With copywriting, I always use the analogy that it's just like baking or cooking. And you have to have your base ingredients there. When you have your base ingredients, you can follow different recipes and make different dishes. But if the base ingredients themselves are not good, like they're bad quality, or there's ones missing, the end result is going to be rubbish, right? And so it's kind of like that idea.
That's oh my gosh, that was so good. That was.
It was I heard myself. I was like, "This is overwhelming." But I'm gonna keep going
because I think so many people are afraid to talk about the pain, talk about to really dive deep into, like, if you continue down this path that you're on right now, this is what's going to happen, and here's why this is the solution. I find that so many people are really apprehensive to do that because they don't want to do like scare tactics or anything. So last question here before we kind of wrap up. Can you, like, where is the fine line between like diving into the pain and then also like not using like scare tactic marketing that everyone right now is like, don't do that? I hope that question makes sense.
Yes, it does. And yeah, because listen, I am completely against the idea of like scare tactic marketing, pushy kind of like full urgency and all that kind of thing. Like, that's not what I do. It's not what I advocate, and it's not what I allow my clients to do or do for them, right? And so if someone if that's the way they do it, like, we don't work with them. So I totally get it. Really what it comes down to is this. It's all about understanding where your ideal client is right now. Like literally. It's not about imagining where they are and kind of, well, I mean, it starts off with that obviously, but it's not about making up an issue. Any business starts off with a real problem, a real life problem, and here's a solution you've created, right? And whether it's like a really, really big, deep, emotionally heavy problem, or whether it's like a problem like my toilet is broken, how do I fix it? You know, that's where it starts off. And it's the same with the copy. So where are they? Like, what's their current situation? Understand that. Understand the emotions. Understand how they genuinely are feeling right now, right? And so that's part one. Obviously, someone who's going down the kind of like bad tactics would then use those in a way that's almost like manipulation. And that's the big thing. Like copywriting and marketing, it's not manipulation, it's persuasion. That's what we're doing. We're persuading people that this is the thing that you need. I always like to look at it as you understand where they are and how they feel. You also understand where they want to be, like where their ideal situation is, what that looks like. And then you also understand how they want to feel. You know, so if right now they feel overwhelmed, they want to feel confident, for example, right? So once you understand that this is how they want to feel, you just need to be able to put it together in a way that shows them if this is how you want to feel, this is what you need. And it's a genuine thing. I guess it's quite the only reason it's difficult to answer that question is because I actually think it's going to come down to the morals of the person, right? Because it's going to come down to how you treat that. Because even those people who are doing it like a bad tactic, they're using the same data, but they're just like going about it in a really kind of like bad way. And so it comes down to also kind of like morals in a way. You have to kind of realize that what I always like to think about it is that you're showing people that you understand them. You're showing that empathy, which is really, really key. You're telling them like, I get it. This is where you are. This is the problem. This is, you know, where you want to be. This is the thing. This is your goal, whatever.
Right.
I can get you there. This thing works. X, Y, Z. Here's how we're going to get you there. Here's what you need. Here's how this can help. But you kind of have to, it's almost like you're a lawyer. You have to make your argument, but you have to let people come to their own conclusion. That's the way I see it. That's the way I see it. And for example, on a sales page, we always end the sales page with this section called like final confident appeal, where you're essentially, I always like to think about, you end with, if it was like a graphic, it would be like you outstretching your hand, right? That's how you end it. Because it's kind of like, okay, if you want to stay where you are right now, then in 6 months you're going to be in the same place, and here's what that's going to look like, right? The kind of worst version of where you are now. But if you want to get to this place where you feel confident about this or less stressed out about that, then what you need is this thing that you're selling. I can help you get there. Are you ready? Like it's right. Literally like, what's it going to be? And I just think if you go with that attitude of like always kind of what's it going to be, the decision is yours. And I think that that's the difference, is because you're empowering them to make their decision themselves versus pushing something onto them.
That's such a mindset shift right there. And that's it.
Yeah.
And I love how you said too, like it's not manipulation, it is persuasion. You empower them to make that decision. And so often we're like, we need to convince them to work with us, right? Sales.
That's it. But see, what I think is the difference as well is the marketing that I do for clients and like in-house, like for my company, it's very attraction-based marketing, right? So it naturally is this idea of drawing people in and empowering them to decide to work with me. I don't chase people and I don't push people and I don't cold DM people and all those kinds of things that like I personally just don't think is the way to do it. And it's kind of, that's exactly how it works as well, right? It's this much more, this almost kind of like feminine energy marketing in a way, like yin marketing. I did a podcast episode on that last week as well. But that's the idea. And that's kind of like how you get away from it being push and quite sort of like salesy and sleazy, is to realize that you're empowering people to make a decision. You're not exactly, you're not trying to convince them, you're not trying to chase them, you're not trying to push them and trying to scare them into making a decision, because it's not going to work. And also, do you want to, have to convince someone to work with you? No. Like,
exactly.
You want somebody
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we hit that on the head, because like that is just such a common misconception, I feel like, that really throws people off. Like, it is a mindset shift there. You're not in the business of convincing people to work with you. I tell my clients that all the time when we go through their sales strategies. Like, we're not convincing people to work with us. We're going to find a way that works for you to build relationships, and like that's how we're going to approach it. Like, I love how we just hit on that. That was awesome and so informative. Thank you. So to kind of shift gears here a little bit, so the way that I love to close these episodes out is 2 more questions. So one, what is something that you wish that you could go back and tell yourself at the start of your business?
Oh, that's hard. That's really difficult. Because I actually would say 2 things, if I'm allowed to say 2 things. Number 1 is the realization that it's gonna take time. So make sure you're doing exactly what you want to do. And to be fair, I realized that early on, because when I first started my business in late 2018, I thought, because I was coming from my job as an academic editor, and so I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll just become a freelance academic editor, because that's kind of like what I've been doing. And I very early on, within 3 months, I was like, this is hard. This is going to be hard. I need to make sure I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing, because the work is going to have to go into it anyway. But I think even kind of drilled down into like specific offers, things that I want to do, I think if I had realized that at the beginning, I maybe would have started doing offers I do now earlier. Because sometimes you think, oh, this is going to be the quicker way to do it, the easier way. It doesn't work like that. Like, there's no overnight success. So realize that. And number 2, more related to do with like what I do and kind of my lessons from my story, would be really get clear on what it is that differentiates you, or how to express that in your messaging, right? Get clear on what it is, and then start talking about it, your USP, what makes you different. Figure those things out. The biggest shifts in my business came when I figured those things out. And really it came from launching the agency, because I knew I needed and wanted to do all that work properly at that stage. Like how we're different, who we're really for, and like just bringing that core messaging and actually focusing on it instead of not focusing on it at all, which is what so many people do. I think if I had done that earlier on, I also would have avoided the 6 months of no clients and hard stuff and kind of crying on the bathroom floor thinking,
exactly. Yes. Oh, that's why I love that question. That's always my second favorite question to ask besides the story, because like it's so transformative, right? And it's everyone listening, like I soak that in, like get grounded in that, because like when I ask these questions, like these are real people who really struggled with this, and like now you can kind of skip that struggle and follow along and like kind of avoid the mistakes. Exactly, like avoid those mistakes. So final question here, how can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you if they want to work with you?
Yes, well, first of all, if you want to hear about messaging, copywriting, marketing, if you want to listen to my episode with Gabrielle and all other kinds of entrepreneurs, you can come and listen to my podcast, which is the Building Your $1 Million Brand podcast. You can find it on Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts and things like that. You can find me on Instagram at Ciara Gigleux. And if you want to learn about the Copy Atelier and how we work with our clients, and if you want to work with us, you can go to our website.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all that in the show notes, guys. So you will get a link to Ciara's podcast, website, Instagram, and everything. So you can just click below and check her out. Thank you so, so much, Ciara. You are so wonderful. And this was just such a value-based episode. I really appreciate you coming on. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with your fellow aspiring entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for listening, my friends, and I'll talk to you soon.